Okay, welcome to another edition of the Edlow podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Another awesome guest coming on. I have here Autumn Dickson. Autumn, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Do you go do a lot of podcasts with other people?
This is actually my first one. This is
Oh,
my
well,
first
there you
episode,
go.
so
Well, you're doing great.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Counted it for the
Uh,
last 5 seconds.
yeah, right. Well, okay, so Autumn is a gospel teacher. You're a writer, you creator. You have a weekly "Come Follow Me." You do "Come Follow Me" stuff on YouTube and Instagram. You do a lot of content. You have a blog. Um, and what? Tell me what started you down that road?
Whew, I have always loved writing. I've always loved writing, and honestly, I just felt extremely not just called, but I felt commanded to do it. Like, I didn't really want to do any of this. It was not what I had in mind. I just wanted to be stay-at-home mom and live quietly and just do my own thing. But I remember I was watching the show Poldark, and I was really, really busy. I had all of these goals, and I was, like, taking care of my kids, all these things. And Poldark was kind of my, like, just downtime. I would just go watch this show, and I love romance shows, and I would, like that was my time, and I just, like, was keeping it for myself, and I remember feeling a whisper for, like, weeks where it was like, "You should give this up and do something more important. You should do something more important." And I remember being like, "I just want one thing. Like, I am sacrificing so much of myself with everything that I'm doing. I just want this one thing." And I kept feeling that push. You should do something more important. You should do something more important. And it just started with a blog. And so I felt comfortable doing that. Like I didn't have to be in front of a camera or talking or any of those things. And so it just started out with a blog. And I was like, okay, like I can do a blog. I like writing anyway. I actually really like teaching the gospel. Gospel Doctrine teacher is my favorite. But I started with just the blog, and then I felt a push to do YouTube, and it was funny because I feel like Heavenly Father I don't know how else to put it, but I feel like he gave me a gateway drug where he's like, "Blog, it's fine." And every single time he would just push me one step further. So then I went to YouTube, then I went to podcast, and then it turned into Instagram, TikTok, and every single time I, like, fought it for a few weeks before I finally was like, "Okay, fine, like, I'll try it." So that's pretty much how I've gotten to this spot where I'm at now.
But you know what, though? That's exactly the way it should go. Like, I've noticed it's funny you bring this up, like, you just wanted to do this thing, and then you got pushed in a different direction. It's what it sounds like. And that's really the way success happens. I was telling my son he's on a mission in Peru, and so we were we were talking, last week, and he was just, I don't know, talking about what he thinks is gonna happen or what his plans are. And I just said, I go, I think you just go with the momentum. Like, my life looks 1,000 times different than it ever did than I ever expected it to. I had all these plans, you know, and, uh, even though it looks so much different, I don't know if I could have written a better story for myself. You know what I mean? Things I didn't even realize I wanted that I got, and things that I thought I wanted, I realized I didn't. And, so I think that's awesome that you just kinda followed the spirit. Now let me ask you on that topic, since we're getting into gospel stuff, we'll just get right into the deep end. So, one thing that I've always kinda wondered about when it comes to revelation, I struggle with knowing when it's just my own head doing it versus when I'm really feeling the spirit. I second guess myself all the time. I'm like, "Alright, God, you need to show me a sign," and then he shows me a sign, and I'm like, "I think I need a signier sign," than that.
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, so how have you learned to follow that?
I actually really love this question. So I have a reel that I talk about this, and it is actually probably the first reel I ever did that like that performed. Probably one of the best I've done on Instagram. And because I do these messages every single week, there have been so many times that I've sat down because I like writing all on my own, and I loved to sit down and just Anyway, I love writing, and there are so many times that I'll sit down and I'll have this idea of the message that I wanna go with and the direction that I wanna go with, and I can't do anything. Like,
Mm,
I'll rewrite it, like, 18 times, it goes nowhere, I can't get anything down on paper. And then there's other times I sit down and I have no idea where I'm going, but I felt the Spirit pause me on something, and I'll, like, start writing on it, and He will all of a sudden, I have this post written. And so because I've been doing this for 6 years. If you go all the way back to when I started my blog, I've been doing this for 6 years, every single week for 6 years.
wow.
And that's a lot of practice. It's a ton
Yeah.
of practice of starting to feel that difference between when I'm doing it and when the Spirit is doing it.
Mm,
And so I actually came up with a challenge. I taught at FSY 2 different times, and I gave my FSY kids a challenge where I told them, like, "You already have this journal and you're doing all these spiritual things throughout the week. So here's your challenge. You're going to pray and say, 'Heavenly Father, I wanna learn the language of the Spirit.' Like, I want to learn this language of revelation." And then as you go throughout your day, you literally write down everything, whether you think it's a prompting, whether you're 5% sure it's a prompting, or whether you're 95% sure it's a prompting, you just write it down and you write it down, write it down, write it down. And as you gather these experiences, you're able to start determining the difference. Like you can start to be like, well, that one felt different than this one. And in order to actually tell, like, what the Spirit is, you also need that opposite side where it's like, "Well, that one didn't really feel different." Am I making sense with how I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, no, it makes sense, yeah,
we
'cause that's it.
collect experiences?
'Cause that's the thing, it's funny you brought up how, like, you felt you wanted to go one way and then you were kinda pushed another way, and you said how it was kind of a f you were kind of fighting it, yet it was still happening. You know, it's funny because those times where I feel like the I struggle the most when it comes to spiritual promptings that don't make logical sense to me, right? And I think you would think that those would be well, obviously, that didn't come from me because it doesn't make any sense, but, like, but at the same time, I reason with myself, like, I don't know. And then if I don't follow, the same thing happens. It's just way more painful, right? It's not like I can get away from it. And so, but yeah, I think that's what you're saying is true. It makes sense that you write them all down and then you say, oh, well, this felt different than this one. And that helps you decipher when it's kind of you thinking it versus the spirit telling you?
I think it's more like I'm almost trying to take this 6 years that I've been doing this and trying to compress it down for anyone who wants to practice that skill.
Yeah.
Um, because I don't know that I've ever actually gone through that experience, but I feel like I've done it on a more, I guess, spread out level. Like I've done it over the 6 years where I've had this practice between telling whether it's coming from myself and when it's coming from the Spirit, and I can't even describe the difference between the 2 and how I can tell when He's talking to me, other than I just practiced so many times, and so that's where the challenge kinda came from, was trying to take that 6 years and condense it down so you can get as much practice as possible in a shorter amount of time, I guess is
Yeah.
where I'm with that.
No, that makes sense. And so you started 6 years ago with a blog. How long how long was the blog versus you starting to do the YouTube channel to the podcast?
I think I'm confused by your question. Sorry.
Yeah, so you said you started with a blog 6
Mhm.
years ago, and then eventually you started to go onto YouTube, and then you started the podcast. Where within that what's that?
You just mean the amount of time that it took me to move on to.
Yeah, yeah, so, like, how long were you doing the blog before you're like, "I'm gonna go ahead and do YouTube?"
I actually don't even know. I don't know. I'm sorry that
Yeah,
I could guess, but everything often blurs together. If
yeah,
I'm being totally
yeah.
I could guess, but I don't know how accurate it would be.
Yeah, well, the reason I ask is because, man, I've been doing this podcast, I don't even I'm the same way, like, it could be 3 years, 4 years, I can't remember. I've done over 200 episodes, and, I get a lot of comments from people who think, "Oh, I've thought about putting on a podcast, thought about doing something, da 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 da," and I always tell them the same thing, I'm like, "Don't even." I was like they're like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna call it," and I go, "You know what? Just start it. Just start it and do it." And I go, and because no one's listening for the first 20 anyway, right? So, I mean, just go ahead and give it a shot, invite your friends on, practice your style, and it does take you a little while before you find your rhythm, you know what I mean, and figure out what you wanna do. Has that what you've seen, like, what you were doing initially in your blog has now graduated into something different?
Probably. I That probably more happened with YouTube than my blog. I feel like my blog has been pretty consistent. The only major change I've made with my blog is I went from doing 1 message a week to 2 shorter messages a week. Is
Mhm,
probably really the only major change I've made with my blog. For YouTube, though, it really was just a matter of just jumping in. Like,
mhm,
I am often a perfectionist, and, like, I didn't wanna do it until I was totally ready, and I felt so confident in what I'm doing. But when you're doing messages that rapidly once a week, there was no I couldn't. Like, there was no way that I could possibly do it perfectly, and where I felt like the Lord was like, "Time to start. Get it together, like, start doing it." I felt like I just had to jump into the deep end, and it took me a long time to start feeling comfortable. In fact, I remember the first time that I did a YouTube episode, it was actually at my husband's work. He set it up for me. He's very technologically savvy, and so he set up my studio where he put in, like, these, like, felt for anyway, he put it all together for me, and we put my phone up on this tripod thing, and he plugged my phone in so that it would charge while it was filming, and I went home at night, like, cause I used to have to go to his work at night to film it and then come home, and I'm usually so tired, so tired at night. But I came home and I started playing the video, and it had this, like, whining noise, and I
mm,
could not get rid of it, and I remember being so frustrated because it had taken not even necessarily, like, so much time. It had taken time, it had taken sacrifice, but emotionally, it had been super taxing on me to try to take that to do that, that I
right,
was so frustrated because that silly little whine came because it had been plugged in, and you couldn't get rid of the sound, and it was oh my gosh, so I had to go back and do it again, and so, like, anyway, you just have
yeah,
to jump in, and it's gonna be messed up in the beginning, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
yeah, yeah, I mean, that's so true. I think that people it's funny because everybody I've talked to, when they hear how long it's taken to kinda have it take off,
Mhm.
that it's like I'm like, "What did you think was gonna happen?" Like, you're immediately gonna get 5,000 followers, like, week 1, 2, Like, do you even have that many friends? You know what I mean? Like, because I'm like, your friends will listen for you for a few, but, you gotta have some really good content before people are actually gonna start listening, and so, I'm sure over time you've kinda developed what you're coming up with, and has that strengthened your testimony, like, doing Come Follow Me every week?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, so, as I was saying before, I just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I didn't want to do anything else, and doing I was worried about the toll it was taking on my kids, and it definitely does, like, there are times when it is a sacrifice for my kids as well, and I have wrestled with that a ton. I have wrestled with that plenty, especially the times, like, when I'm pregnant and I'm leading up to, like, giving birth, I do double the amount of messages that I do otherwise so that I can take a little break after I have a baby. And especially in those times, I feel like I am missing a lot with my kids, and I feel like they're getting a mom who's a little more frustrated and busy and stressed out. But in the same breath, it has completely changed me. I'm a completely different person. I would say right underneath motherhood, probably. Motherhood has probably been the most defining change in me, the biggest factor in making me who I am today. Right behind that would probably be my blog, my podcast, all of these things, even more so than my mission. I have learned more, and probably the most important lesson that I learned is how much God loves me. And it sounds so simple and so silly, but it literally touches every single part of my life. When I make mistakes, I it doesn't derail me for forever anymore, and I'm excited about the future. I believe in good things to come, and all the sacrifices that I have had to make and all the sacrifices that my kids have had to make, it can't even begin to touch the blessings that I have gotten from that testimony that God loves me, and I've watched it influence my kids too, where my daughter will have a really hard time, and she's very much like me, and she was very, very type A personality, very perfectionist, but she'll have a bad morning, and then she'll just come and say sorry, and it's so easy for her to move on, and I know that's because she watches me move on when I make mistakes now, and I know that that came from doing this work that God asked me to do. I The ways that I have changed, I see it reflect in my children now, and I'm so grateful
You
most of
should
the
be, and, you know, did you say that occasionally you still struggle with the fact that it's attacks on your kids?
Yeah, it is.
Or you've kinda gotten over that?
Um, yeah, I think I do still struggle with that sometimes. It really is always a struggle. When I originally sit down to start filming, I always struggle with it. I always struggle doing doing my podcast and doing my YouTube videos. Yeah,
Can I stop you right there and just give you a little advice for someone a little bit older with a few, older kids than you?
I
I
would
know
love
you don't know him, but, um, don't take this the wrong way, but that's kinda silly. Like,
that.
because the reason is like, first of all, you've said something a few times I've clocked it. You've said, "I just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom." Let's make it let's make it clear that just a stay-at-home mom is more than enough. Okay? That's a that trust me, as someone who's doing it all, okay, like, that is a tough job, especially at the age how old are your kids for the record? I know you told me off there, but how old are your kids?
8, 6 sorry, 8, 6, 5, 2, 1.
Okay, you are in the trenches. Like, this is the hardest time, just like it's different when they get older, like, all my kids are teenagers. I got 19, 17, 15, and 13, and the 19-year-old's on a mission, so he doesn't even count anymore. But, like but I got 2 teenage girls and a son, and it is a way different war now than it was, but, like, you're in the, "I'm still trying to keep you from, like, accidentally killing yourself," type stuff, and dealing with kids who can't sustain you can't leave them alone for a couple of hours. Like you have to be there with them all the time. That is not a just a stay-at-home mom job. That's a full-time job plus. You are entitled to have something for yourself. You shouldn't feel guilty just because, like, you need a break. I mean, I'm sure your husband, who I'm sure is a nice guy, I'm sure that he probably goes to the gym or plays basketball with his buddies or does something every once in a while too. He probably doesn't feel super guilty about that, or at least he shouldn't. So why would you feel guilty about doing something that's not only a benefit to you, but is a benefit to thousands of people, right? I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like there is actually another layer to that, because when I struggle getting in front of the camera or when I struggle with needing to do these things,
Mhm,
it's not just the fact that I wanna be a stay-at-home mom, like, it's not just about guilt with my kids. There are other experiences that I've had that have led me to that point. So, when I was younger, all I wanted to do was be a musician, like,
mm,
so desperately. Like, I remember I would just be driving the car and listening to music, and it would just overwhelm me how badly I wanted to be a pop star or a singer or a musician, whatever it was.
mm,
And I went that route for a while. I dropped out of college and I tried being a musician. I worked with it wasn't exactly a record label, it was kind of a company that would lead you to the point where you could talk to a record label. Like, I was headed down that path, and I promoted myself constantly, and I developed some health problems, ended up having to be taken out of that environment, and hindsight's 2020, and now I can see how miserable I was promoting myself all the time. And so when the Lord asked me to do a blog and when he's asked me to do the YouTube and then the podcast and the Instagram, I feel like I almost like jumped to the opposite end of the spectrum where I was like, I don't want to get anywhere near promoting myself. Like, I don't want to, like, I have this constant dichotomy in my mind where I'm like, I want to share my testimony and celebrate the gospel and share it with absolutely everyone. And I'm also trying to fight that side of myself where I feel like I'm still promoting myself or anything like that. And I have to fight between those two feelings. Honestly, that's probably one of the more underlining issues when I get in front of the camera. It just, I guess, takes me back to that person that I don't want to be anymore.
So, what was it about promoting yourself when you were trying to become a musician? By the way, did you play any instruments?
I played guitar, yeah.
You did, okay. You still do? I'm sure soon?
Yes, I'm actually learning more piano now. I'm trying to teach
Oh,
myself piano.
okay. Good. So, but, when you were trying to become a musician, what was it about promoting yourself that made you hate it so much?
I don't think I hated it in the moment. What did I hate so much about it? I think there were a lot of factors that contributed to how miserable I was at the time, but I think they're one of my flaws, just to be totally straight, and I talk about it in my podcast too, so it's not like I haven't talked about it before. One of my flaws is vanity. I really like people to think I'm wonderful and amazing and so cool, and when you're fighting against that and simultaneously promoting yourself, it is really difficult. Every criticism hits harder, and it's so much harder when someone praises you to, like, not let it go to your head, or you just get so built up, and there's just it's just an emotional roller coaster because you are allowing your self-worth to be determined because I guess I fell prey to this vanity, to, like, wanting people to like me. It was just an emotional roller coaster, depending on how people were feeling about me at any given moment.
I don't I don't know if I'd call that vanity, though. I mean, who doesn't wanna be liked? You know
That's
what
true.
I mean? Everybody wants to be liked. I mean, if you were like, "I want everyone to think I'm, like, the hottest," this and that maybe, but if you're just like, "I like to be liked, I like people to think I'm cool and I'm good," like, everybody wants that first. I'm just trying to like, I it's interesting because I can see a lot of what you're obviously I don't know what it's like to be you, but I can see a lot of that myself where, I my story was when I before I went on a mission, I thought I was going to become a professional wrestler. And I eventually did actually become a professional wrestler and I still occasionally do it. But I thought for sure I was gonna go. I had a thing where I was talking to this guy in Pennsylvania who does a lot of feeders for the WWE. I was actually gonna go out there. I was gonna train with them, and I was gonna get a look and do all this stuff. You can't tell on the camera, but I'm 6'7", you know? I won't say how much I weigh, but right now because I'm not happy with it. I've a bigger dude, and, I really thought I was gonna do that, and then I decided to go on a mission, and then when I came back from my mission, I realized that wasn't the life I wanted. I wanted to be home with my kids. I wanted to be able to, you know, uh, that lifestyle wasn't too conducive to someone who's an active member of the church. A lot of people came back with bad injuries, a lot of guys on steroids or pain meds, and I just was like, "You know what? That's probably not the life I want to have," and decided to go and become an attorney. And, but it's interesting because anybody who likes to perform, I think they all have something inside them where they want people to cheer them and, they like the attention. And so, yeah, but it's a tough road when you have to sit there and, like, I mean, don't look at your comments, you know what I mean? Like, you don't look at the comments on your YouTube shows, 'cause it's filled with negativity, but, you know you're good. You're alright, right? So,
I know I'm good with the Lord, and it has been that has been a gift as well. Like, I have gotten a lot of practice separating myself, and that was one of the things the Lord told me in the beginning where I was like, "I don't wanna get anywhere close to a camera." Like, I don't wanna get anywhere close to that line where I'm hyper focused on myself anymore. And the Lord's like, "Actually, you just need practice." And so I've gotten a lot of practice separating myself from those comments and being able to be okay when I do have errors and point it out and people point it out. I have gotten practice being like, "You know what? Me and the Lord are good, and I've made errors, but He is so proud of me for how hard I'm trying to follow Him."
yeah, plus also, like, the people, especially out in when you're dealing with, like, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, when you realize the kind of people that are pointing out your errors are people who don't try at all, you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
sorry." sorry, dude in your mom's basement who hasn't ever done anything, like, sorry sorry you don't think that I'm doing great on my indie podcast. So, now are you a gospel doctrine teacher right now? Do you teach?
I am not. I actually am activity days leader, and I just got called a stake social media specialist. So,
Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that work
the
out? Yeah.
the Lord is trying to push me in a direction, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting too, the one thing that I thought I am actually a gospel doctrine teacher, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, man, we could talk shop." I thought it was really interesting this last Sunday, we learned the story of David and Goliath, and, of course, everybody knows the story of David and Goliath, but the angle I took, and I think the Come Follow Me lessons took, which I thought was really interesting, was highlighting I call them characters, I hate doing that because they are real people, but when you think about that fight, I thought it was so fascinating when you looked at the different perspectives from everybody involved, where Goliath is, like, sitting there going like, bring me, your best. Like he thought he was unbeatable. Whereas Saul, David goes to Saul and Saul's like, you don't have any training or armor or whatever. And so Saul only saw the limitations. And David is just like, who is this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine who thinks he's going to take on the God of Israel? You know what I mean? And I just think that's such a great lesson to learn the perspective of how much of our world is shaped by like, our reality is shaped by our perspective. Have you noticed that in your own life?
Absolutely, that's something my husband and I talk about a lot, actually, is no matter what you believe in, you can find evidence of it. Like,
Mhm. It's true.
and so it's been interesting to more voluntarily choose the gospel with that in mind because before I felt like I was trying to always like collect spiritual experiences to like be like, no, it's true, it's true, it's true. But now I'm like, I choose this. It's been so good for my life. Anyway,
Mm.
yes.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Was there a time in your life uh, where you maybe had some sort of a question of whether your faith was true?
Probably a couple of different times. I think one of the biggest moments I ever had was actually on my mission where I was like, am I just crazy? Like, has this all been a complete joke? Like, everything that anyway, that was probably the time I was struggling the most, and it was going on for a couple of weeks where I was in the trenches, and I'm like, "I don't know if I believe this, and I don't know if everything I've ever believed has just been a lie." And our mission president got up at some meeting, I can't remember what it was, but he challenged everybody to read the Book of Mormon for 30 minutes of their personal study. And when you're on your mission, you have so many things to study. There are so many yes, there are so many things to study, and I had gotten so wrapped up in studying for investigators, all these things, it had been a long time since I had just read the Book of Mormon, and he challenged us to read the Book of Mormon for 30 minutes every day, and, like, literally within a week of doing that, I didn't even feel doubts anymore. They were just gone. Like, they no longer plagued me after just reading the Book of Mormon for 30 minutes a day. It wasn't like I had all my questions answered or, like, all of these doubts that I was struggling with. It's not like I resolved any of them, but I felt completely differently after just reading the Book of Mormon 30 minutes a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. I had a very similar experience on my mission. I was only out there for a few weeks. I mean, and where did you serve?
Indiana.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
So did I.
No
Indian
way. That's awesome.
Indianapolis. Wait, what years did you serve?
I know so August 2013 through February 2015.
Okay, I'm a little bit before you, 2000 to 2002. So,
Right on.
yeah, so that was before they even had the temple in Carmel.
Yeah.
Anyway, where did you s okay, what areas did you serve? I'm sure the whole audience is really interested in this, but where did you serve?
Yes, for sure. I first served at IUPUI, the college, and then I moved to oh my gosh, it's been too long, you're gonna put me on the spot. Westfield, Greenwood, and then I served on IU campus in Bloomington, and then I served in of course, it's gonna completely slip my mind. My last transfer Lafayette, West was it West
Okay.
Lafayette?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, why can't I remember? It's by
Right.
Purdue.
Right,
Their
Purdue, yeah.
family
Yeah.
ward by Purdue.
Wow, okay, yeah, so I was in it's not there anymore, it used to be in the Fall Creek branch, but Fall Creek was in Indianapolis, and then I was in Columbus, which is right next to
Mhm.
Bloomington, and then I was in Huntington, which is just 30 minutes south of Fort Wayne, and then I served on Notre Dame campus the last 7 months of my mission, and so in fact, if you know who Patrick Mason is, he's, big church historian, he was my ward mission leader. He was getting his
Oh,
PhD at
really?
Notre Dame. Yeah, he's been on the podcast a few times now, and that's where I knew him because I would just pepper him with all sorts of really deep doctrinal questions because he's the smartest man I know, but yeah, I mean, I had a similar situation. I was just walking off of 52nd Street, like in Indianapolis, and you know how it is in Indiana. I mean, there's a church on every corner. There's mega churches everywhere, and everybody's Baptist, Apostolic, Pentecostal. They all very much, very much entrenched in their own beliefs. And the thing I struggle with, I would say before I went on my mission, I had what I would call just kind of almost like a social conversion to the gospel. It was like a cultural thing. Um, but I don't know if I had a strong abiding. There were glimpses of testimony, but it certainly wasn't strong. And so I really struggled with the fact that other people seemed to have just as much of a conversion to their faith as I had to mine. And it wasn't until my companion challenged me to pray and ask God if the Book of Mormon was true, just like an investigator. Wasn't until then that I got the answer, and I was like, okay. And the thing that I think was really interesting about that is that um, that was the first time when I prayed that it was like I was going to make a decision based on what the answer was. Like, I was actually committed to, okay, so, like, if I get a no, I'm leaving. If this is good, though, I'm committed. I'll do the 2 years, but I need to know. And I got the confirmation that I did it. And the thing that's so fascinating about that, and I talked with Jasmine Rapley about this a few weeks ago, we had her on the podcast, was I I found it really interesting in my studies of the gospel, especially the Old Testament, where the children of Israel are literally seeing Moses part the Red Sea, and just a few weeks later, they're worshiping a golden calf, and then he brings down the 10 commandments, and then they're walking for a few weeks, a month more, and they get thirsty, and then they're murmuring. And they're just constantly like seeing all these amazing things, manna from heaven every day, and then they're questioning again. And it's not until you have those strong spiritual experiences, those are what convert. It's not the evidence, it's not seeing, it's the faith. And I mean, have you seen that in your life?
I think I think the strongest parts of my testimony I think there was a shift in my testimony. Like I said, I think previously I would try to collect these spiritual experiences and I would try to collect enough of them so I would feel secure in my testimony. But like you said, like you're walking around and all these other people are having these incredible spiritual experiences. And so it's really confusing. Like, oh, I've had spiritual experiences, you've had spiritual experiences. I think I think the shift, at least for me, that really, I guess, made me just feel extremely confident in the gospel was because of these messages that I have to do every week. I feel like I'm spending real time in the trenches with Christ all the time. Like, I feel like I have this very real, tangible relationship with Him. I know Him. And it's really hard to deny that very real relationship where I talk to Him and He talks to me back. And it's so consistent all the time. I can't deny that. And so when I have friends here on the East Coast, one in particular who thinks I'm going to hell, which is fine. Uh, it's not the first time I've heard it.
Yeah, it's like, that's cool. We could be friends though. Yeah.
You can save me. You can try to save me. That's fine. But for me to feel pretty confident in being like, I know Christ, like pretty well. Like we're buds. Like we're good. You don't have to worry about me. I know him. And he knows me. Like we're fine. And I think it was really that relationship rather than just trying to collect these experiences as evidence. It's just this relationship that has made me feel so confident.
Yeah. So if one thing that I've found really interesting as a gospel doctrine teacher, and I'm sure you see this probably, maybe people reach out to you. Um, I tend to get people who want to talk to me about their faith struggles. If someone's listening who is struggling with faith, what would be your recommendation to them?
Struggling with faith. Sorry, I want to make sure I answer this how I really mean it. If you are truly struggling with your faith, I would recommend going back to what I was describing in my own testimony, just that relationship with Jesus Christ. Like, if you need to, push all the extra things aside for a minute and just look at your relationship with Jesus Christ. Find out if he's there, if that's what you're struggling with. Get to know him and let him lead you along. I would say you have to experiment with the word in order to find out whether it's true. And that means like try going in for a month. Like turn off your podcasts, turn off the Instagram that are filling your mind with doubts. Like turn it off just for a month. You can always turn them back on. That's very, very easy to do. You can turn them back on. But for 1 month, go all in. Go all in, like go to the temple. If you can't go inside the temple, go outside the temple, read the Book of Mormon, say your prayers, go to church, do all of these things. And don't just do them to do them. Don't check them off as a list, but really do them being like, I'm going to read the Book of Mormon right now because I'm trying to learn about Christ and I'm trying to spend some time with Christ. I'm going to go to church because I'm going to try to worship Christ, center it on Christ, turn the other stuff off, go all in for a month and see if your feelings change. That would
Mm,
honestly be my advice.
yeah. I like that. I like that. I sometimes what I tell people, when they're really struggling with things is I say, um, okay, well, my number one recommendation is don't stop doing all of the things until you know for sure you're gonna, that you don't believe. Because that's been one of the fascinating things. I've done a lot of podcasts on faith crisis, some people who've left the church, some people who stayed. And I think one of the biggest factors is kind of like a weird chicken and egg thing where, okay, well, I'm not really sure if the gospel is true. And then all of a sudden they start compromising some of the things that they normally would, be stronger on. And then that kind of deadens the spirit a little bit. And then there's a little bit more. And then next thing you know, they're out. And I'm not sure, and I'm not making a comment and saying the reason why they leave is because they've done some grievous sin and they wanna go and do party or anything, but it's so I find that it's much harder to stay connected when you're not following, because you're not getting the benefits of the Spirit, you're not getting benefits of following the gospel by doing that. That makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think anyone who starts like walking down that path, like
Mhm.
where you start hearing these things that you have doubts in and that you're struggling with, all of those things, like we were talking about before, you can find evidence no matter what path you're going down. And I have gone down some of those paths where I've listened to some of that information because I didn't want to be tricked. I didn't want to all of a sudden wake up one day and realize I've been lied to. And so I have listened to some of those things and I remember just feeling like so awful and so just yucky and like I don't want to touch this anymore. And then turning around and reading the Book of Mormon and reading it consistently and feeling completely uplifted. The feeling is so different. Why would you follow this yucky feeling over this positive feeling? Like, I read my scriptures and I talk to him all the time. Like, how can I deny that? I don't I don't know if I'm even making sense, but
You're absolutely making sense. I mean, the Spirit testifies of truth, and when you feel engrossed like that, that doesn't sound like a testimony of truth to me, but
I agree.
I don't know, it's really hard. It's a struggle, especially because if you went and I no, I'm not supposed to ask a woman how old she is, but how old are you?
I'm 33 or 34. I'm
Okay.
34.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah. So, I mean, especially when you get to our ages when you're in your mid-30s to mid-40s, that's the time when, people start having midlife crises and doing all these different things and starting to question these things. And, there's a truth to that analogy of holding to the rod because, we really are as you go forward longer, I remember telling one of my kids recently, I'm like, if you think I have this all figured out, like, you are dead wrong. Like, I'm in that same mist of darkness that you are, and I'm just hanging on and trying to feel my way through just like everybody else, and it's really easy if you don't have something, to hold on to. It's just, you're just have that house that's built on the sand, and it just gets tossed to and fro, and I've noticed that as I hold on to that, it keeps me grounded and it keeps me in the right direction, and I don't end up going astray.
Yeah.
So,
It actually also reminds me of the story, like, with the plagues of Egypt and Moses and everything. 'Cause it's almost like, at least how I have compared it, is all these plagues and the waters parting, all of these things. I feel like a lot of times when you were born into the church, you're raised in the church, you have all of these, like, really incredible things happening for you. Like, you've got the church camps, you've got the youth conferences, you have all these things that are trying to bolster your testimony, and a lot of times that path will lead to, like, going on a mission, getting married. Not always, but, like, a lot of times it'll lead towards that path. And then after that, after you get to the other side of the Red Sea, the rest of it just gets to be wilderness.
yeah,
It really is, like, we're walking through the wilderness, and those plagues and that Red Sea, like, they were amazing experiences that can contribute to our testimony, but there is something about walking through the wilderness, following the prophet, whether in the form of the scriptures or the modern day prophet, following that prophet and trusting him. It sometimes feels like that wilderness is going to go on forever. And it's interesting because it's 40 years in the wilderness, and 40 is symbolic in the scriptures. It's kind of this idea of complete as well, like you're going through the entirety of it. And so when you're walking through this wilderness, you're going through the entirety of what you need to go through in order to be complete at the end, in order to become like your heavenly father. That wilderness experience where you're just holding on the whole time and listening to the prophet is very important to your growth, to your eventual exaltation.
I agree. Now, as someone who teaches Come Follow Me, one of the things that I found so fascinating is you're doing them in 10 to 20-minute chunks. And as a gospel doctrine teacher and gospel doctrine changing to 25 minutes soon, I'm like, I can't get through a lesson as it is. So tell me, what recommendations do you have for people who are going to have to make this transition to have like 20-minute lessons? How are you cramming all that in?
Um, Stop trying to make it through a whole lesson. The goal the goal should always be for your audience to have an experience of Christ at the end. And you
Mm,
don't to make it through all 20 chapters of the Old Testament week in order for them to have an experience with Jesus Christ. If that means you're only focusing on one story, focus on one story and it doesn't matter. They have the rest of the week to go through all of these other stories, and if they're going to the best way to help them do that is to help them have that experience with Jesus Christ on Sunday so it inspires them to want to go through the rest of it themselves. You also have to let go of the responsibility of, like, teaching them everything, because I have learned that the Lord doesn't reveal everything. Like, there are so many things that I've learned from the Lord that I can't even begin to express about the gospel. Like, I can't adequately express it. And we see that through the scriptures. We see that with modern day prophets where they're like, I can't even say it. Like, I can't even describe to you what the Lord has shown me. And that is because there has to be a personal amount of work put in. And so you take these 25 minutes, your entire goal is to help them experience Jesus Christ. That's your only goal. And if yes, have a plan, be prepared, but if that is your goal and everything else is just secondary to that, I think you're gonna be just fine.
I really like that. I love that what you said. It's not about getting through a lesson. It's about making sure that people in your audience are having an experience with Christ. I like that a lot. I'll probably steal it. Uh, no, I'll give you the credit. I'll make that one of our clips. So, um, is do you as you so you've been doing this for 6 years, have you gone through knowing you just started the podcast and the YouTube, have you officially gone through the entire standard works yet?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so
I'm my way the second time.
which one of the is there a certain book of scripture that you love to teach the most?
Oof. This is gonna sound so lame, but whatever book I'm in at the time, I always just really liked the Book of Mormon. I
Mhm,
struggled with the Bible, and I always felt like the Doctrine and Covenants was a little bit boring because when you would just jump in and read it, like, cover to cover, there's a lot of repetition, and there's a lot of phrases that would almost seem trite, if that makes
mhm,
sense, like,
yeah.
"Rest in
I
your
s
sleep, whole
I
of the Lord."
struggle
Yeah,
I struggle with the Doctrine and Covenants. Not because of that, but more because it's like, "Alright, so here's a letter written to Orson Pratt about going to a mission in the Eastern States," he's going to England.
yep.
Not really sure how that's applicable here, but, you know?
Yeah, no, I
Cool.
so and I actually I I would really struggle with that, but whenever I am, like, I approach each book of scripture differently because they're all different types of scripture. So, for example, the Doctrine and Covenants, I always struggle with the Doctrine and Covenants, but when I'm in the year for Doctrine and Covenants, I have to really study it, and the best way that I've found to study the Doctrine and Covenants is you have to know the people because you can't relate to the people, you can't understand what the Lord's trying to tell them until you understand what they're going through. So, like, just as an example, the chapter that's to Brigham Young when the Lord is like, "You don't need to leave your family anymore." If you study what Brigham Young's wife was going through while he was on his mission, that woman was incredible, like, absolutely hands down incredible what she was going through, and the relief that must have come to her when the Lord told Brigham Young, like, "You can just stay home now. You don't need to go on a mission anymore, like, you can just stay home now." When you hear the stories behind it, all of a sudden, these words come alive, and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, it's like reading your patriarchal blessing through someone else's eyes, like, all of a sudden, they're like, "No, these are the words coming directly from the Lord to these people," and you can see, like, "Oh, I'm sure that phrase stuck out to them for this reason," and, like anyway, it makes it come alive. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite book of scripture or my favorite section of the Doctrine and Covenants is the section, I think it's 121 and 122, where Joseph Smith is in Liberty Jail. And when you understand he's in Liberty Jail and what God's trying to teach him there, I I've I've come to the conclusion, and I don't think I'm off base saying this, that I think we look at trials and we're like, "Oh, trials are just kind of a part of this and the plan of salvation." And I was like, "No, I think God's trying to teach us that it's an essential part, like it was a
Mhm.
requirement that we go
Yes.
through it. Like,
Yes, yes.
it's not just it's not just a happenstance or being choosing good and evil, it's a part of the learning process, and we have to go through them. That's why we learn so much from them. And I've even gone so far, and I've said this on the podcast a few times, and I've given talks about this. I don't know if this is true, but I've often wondered, I'm like, why did the third of the host of heaven in the in the councils of heaven and pre-existence, why'd they leave over this whole agency idea? Like, what was it about agency that was so scary? And I think that's probably what it was. If you're sitting there saying like, "Hey, by the way, you're all going to get a chance to choose between good and evil, and every single one of you is going to choose evil. And then when you do, you're actually going to hurt yourself and you're going to hurt everybody around you when you do it. And then they're all going to choose evil and they're all going to hurt you too. And you're going to go these terrible trials. And it's like, yeah, that sounds kind of crappy, and yet we all jump for joy, and then of course we get down here and we're like, why do we have to go through all this? Oh, why me? Oh, come on now, but we all were jumping for joy back then. So it's kind of interesting. I love
Yeah, the idea with the trials, I have learned, like, so often we see people get up during Fast Testimony meeting or when they make comments in Sunday school and they talk about these tender mercies that the Lord has given them, and they're so grateful for these tender mercies, and they should be, like, those are blessings. Yes, we praise the Lord for these tender mercies, but life becomes a different game when you realize that the trials are the tender mercies. They're the whole reason we came here was so that we could grow. Like, if he were to only give tender mercies as we traditionally think about them, if he were to never give trials, well, guess what? You're gonna get to the other side and have nothing that you came here to accomplish. When you think about we're trying to essentially step into the shoes of our Heavenly Father, right? We want to participate in His work. We want to become like Him. He wants us to grow to become like Him. Your trials don't end in this life. I think sometimes we think, oh, I just have to get through. And if I can muscle through, then I can just be happy for eternity. Not exactly, like, God weeps, like, he
Yeah.
goes through trials, but he has learned how to make eternity worth living, like, how to make it not empty forever, how not to make it sorrowful forever. He has learned how to take those trials in stride and in peace and in confidence, and that is exactly what we're learning. Like, it's not like, this is literally just a continuation. As we die, it's just gonna keep on going. It doesn't end, like, we get to learn to be like our Heavenly Father and take those trials in stride rather than being like, "Oh, I just have to wait till it's over, and once it's over, like, then I'm done." It's not
Yeah.
exactly how it works.
No, I don't think it is, and I think that that's yeah, I mean, the other thing is, and it's not easy to see it when you're in it, but I know when you can look back, like, I don't think I've ever had a trial that I've looked back at and gone like, "Man, I didn't come out in a better spot than I was before the trial." Like, it was a terrible trial, and it was something I definitely not saying I'd ever want to go through again, but, I came away a better person. I came away in a better position. I came away, much just came away either being better or learning I can do hard things, and that's invaluable. It really is. I mean, it's funny too because I've been having lots of you understand, you've been on a mission, you have all these deep thoughts when you're on a mission. My son is on one right now, and I we had that same conversation where it's just like, yeah, you can't see it right now, but 10 years down the road, you're gonna look back and go, man, that was exactly what I needed to go through at the time to get to the next spot. And, it's just like anything, it's just like anything else. It may take time and that's how you get strengthened. Your spiritual body gets strengthened just like your physical body under pressure, and so it's quite fascinating. It's an interesting, mortality is an interesting experience, but what a wild ride, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you have 5 small kids,
Mhm.
and I'm sure there's lots of people if they're listening to this Come Follow Me lesson. Well, actually, before I go into that, let me just say one other thing too. One of the things that I think is so interesting about these tender mercies, in my gospel doctrine lessons, I always leave open parts for people. I go, does anybody have an experience with this that they can share?
Mhm.
Especially when we're talking about struggles. And I know that I always joke and I'm like, so who wants to be vulnerable? Who wants to drop their dirt? Who wants to tell me all their stuff as like a joke? But the reason I do that is because I've been doing it now for 3 or 4 years as a gospel doctrine teacher, and never wanted to change. It's the best calling ever. But um, I pointed out this last week. I go, if you've noticed as we've had these things, I think every single person who comes every week, by now, everybody has shared a story that illustrates this point. We have all had an experience where we went through some trial and God delivered us. So I want everybody to remember that next time, or if you're in it right now, that every single person in this room has had it, and every single person in this room has gotten out, has come away, right? We've all survived the worst day of our lives. And that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good lesson to learn. So but anyway, back to what I was gonna say. So you got 5 small kids, and there's probably people listening to this, and they're like, "I would love to do Come Follow Me," but having 5 small kids between the ages of 9 and 1, that is not conducive to a spirit-led lesson at all. So if you were talking to that person, what would be the questions or what would be your recommendations for them?
2 things, 2 things, and I think my situation is a little bit different because I feel like the Lord has commanded me to do these lessons, and so He is going to like, I will do what the Lord commands because He's gonna help me make it happen. But in other, I guess, scenarios, there would be 2 things that I would recommend doing. 1, I've always been super type A, like, very focused, very efficient in what I'm doing in my life. I have goals and accountability sessions. I'm, like, really, really intense, if we're just being totally honest. And having kids has obliterated it, and I say, "The Lord gave me this so that I could understand my husband who is textbook ADHD." I get interrupted every 5 minutes. And now when I do have quiet time to myself, it is very hard for me to get back to who I was, like, focusing, like, really, really, really well. And so something that I started doing that has been utterly life-changing in a million different ways is I started writing my prayers. And there's a lot of good ways to do this. You can kneel down and just put a journal in front of you and you can pray like normal. And then when you feel something, you can start to write. I do it where I write down everything so that if I get distracted, I can come back on and like just pick up right where I left off instead of having to start over again and just going in a loop that is inefficient and doesn't work well. It tunes me in. It allows the Lord to work with me. So if you're struggling with focus when you're in the trenches, writing down your prayers has been absolutely life changing. The second thing that I would advise is studying the gospel more in your life does not necessarily mean sitting in front of your scriptures for an hour. I highly recommend always reading your scriptures. It's a commandment of the Lord, and there's a reason it's a commandment. Sometimes that means you're going to read 3 verses. Sometimes it's going to mean you're going to read 3 pages. I don't know. But rather than trying to make this time goal of how long you're going to sit in front of your scriptures, instead read them for however long you can, but then take Christ into the rest of your day instead. Instead of
Mm,
trying to exit your day, exit your family, exit everything else to go spend time with Christ, just take him with you. Like, and the lessons that you'll learn, like when you're in the thick of it trying to make dinner or in the thick of it, like at work, whatever it is, when you take Christ with you, you are gonna learn the same lessons that you can learn sitting in front of the scriptures. You're gonna learn how about patience, and you're gonna learn about charity, and you're gonna learn to see people as God sees them, to look on people's hearts. You're gonna learn all these really powerful lessons when you take Christ with you. Those it doesn't matter if it's coming through the scriptures or if it's coming through the Spirit with taking Christ with you. The whole point of all of this is to get closer to Christ, and He can do that in a lot of different forms. And so don't put this pressure on yourself to sit down and hit every single point in the "Come Follow Me" lesson. Instead, bring Christ with you.
yeah, I like that. I like that. I have my kids, it's funny, you might see this with your older kids as they get older. One of the things that, uh, happened recently to me was so my 2 daughters are in seminary, and, so they're getting, "Come follow me every day." They're getting the scriptures every single day. And then on top of that also, you know, where they go to church and they do all those things. So we just recently, my younger daughter, we were reading scriptures and I was like, all right, so how, I don't remember the question, but I asked a question and she goes, pray, fast, go to church, go to mutual, go to the temple, go on a mission. And I'm like, why do you say it like that? And she's like, "Well, because it's the same answer every time we read." She's like, "I get this every single day," right? She's like, "Every single day we're going to the seminary and you're cramming this down our throats, and then I go to church and they say the same things, and then here they say the same things." And so, I didn't really know how to answer it then, but then later on, I was kind of looking through my phone and looking at some reels, and they started talking about how European players have kind of started dominating the NBA. And they had some coaches, college coaches on there and asking them why. And they said, well, all the kids that grew up in America, they grew up watching ESPN and they want to be on the highlight reels. But the European players, they learn the fundamentals. And he's like, and the fundamentals matter. And so I told the kids that. I was like, we keep teaching these things because they're what matters. They're the ones that like the greatest basketball players, they knew the fundamentals. They weren't flashy. So we teach you these things and we drill these things so that you keep knowing these things. And so I think my recommendation to people when they talk about it is I go, I just like, I see Gospel Doctrine has an ability to get very deep and off on tangents and go in weird places, and so I make sure that I'm like, I am only gonna focus on the fundamentals. We're faith, baptism, repentance, gift of the Holy Ghost, endure to the end, trials, plan of salvation. That's it. We don't need to go into collab. We don't need to go into all this other stuff. Let's just like hit the fundamentals and everything else will be okay. And so,
Yeah, there was an elder on my mission who probably was one of more I only had him as a leader for, like, a transfer, maybe 2 transfers, but he would come to district meeting, and he would just, like, blow all of us away with his incredible insights that he would share with us, and I had so much admiration for him. Elder Heber Peterson, if he ever
mhm,
actually I doubt he'll ever listen to this, but if he ever does, thank you,
mhm,
Elder Heber Peterson, and he one time I came to him on a PD, I was like, "Where do you learn this? Like, what book are you reading? Is this in Jesus the Christ? Because I can't find what you're finding." And I was like, "Where are you finding, like, all these really deep insights?" And he was like, "I don't study deep doctrine, I study the simple doctrines deeply." And
mhm.
it completely set the tone for the rest of my mission. It is so true. It's so true.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. So what's your goal? What do you hope? Like, do you have hopes and dreams of pushing farther on in social media and doing what you're doing? Do you like what you're doing now? What's next?
That is a hard question. I've had a lot of directions that I've considered going. Have considered I've considered writing books. I would love to speak. I had the time of my life teaching at FSY. Like,
Mm,
I adored it. I thought it was so much fun. To I would love to speak. I'd love to be a speaker. I I would love to write a book, but I also have lately been thinking again about music and writing
mm.
music again. I think it's gonna be a little bit before I can totally jump back into that. I don't know if the Lord's warming me up to that idea again, but I would love to start jumping into music again eventually, writing music and also inviting other LDS musicians to come and share their talents too. Anyway, that's just those are the kinds of
That
things that are on my mind
well,
lately.
that'd be exciting. That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, so are you starting to practice more? Are you starting to write yet? Or
I am mostly just practicing right now, and I just have thoughts that have tumbled through my head. Like, I would love once my kids are a little bit older, I would love to get to the point where I potentially even start a separate Instagram where I there are so many talented LDS musicians, like people who are so talented and have so much to give. And I would love to have a place where everybody could come together and find uplifting and not necessarily all like happy yay music, like also some of the deeper, harder things or like also secular music, but all clean, like wonderful music. And I would love to bring in lots of different artists so people can find artists that they can listen to and trust. Like I would
I
love
I think
yeah.
that'd be a great idea. That'd be awesome. So, you know, we'll have to talk off air about different options for some of that stuff you have to do, but there's a lot of different options where you could really do that. One of my good friends, he's been on the podcast a couple times, Tony Overbay, who's a mental health provider. He does multiple podcasts, and you could easily do that. You could easily set up a second one with your own account and just start working through that, and just because I don't know which one you use, but most of them have the ability to do multiple podcasts if you wanted to branch out and do something different. So, I've thought about doing that because I do a bunch of pro wrestling podcasts, and I'm like, why don't I just do a pro wrestling podcast? But I just want, Tony actually told me, he goes, I would listen, he goes, I like listening to your wrestling podcast, but I would not listen to your wrestling podcast. And so I was like, okay, so that makes sense. Like if I'm trying to get humans to kind of come together, which is the purpose of my podcast, is really to get everybody to kind of see that we all are actually a lot more alike than different and just hear cool stories. It make no sense for me to do that. But for you, it might make sense to do that. So look forward to what you're doing next. Well, okay, so we're gonna wrap up here. I have 3 questions I ask everybody. So I'm gonna ask you these 3 questions. Are you ready?
Right.
Okay. What is your biggest success in life?
There are a great many things that bring me joy, but I would have to say probably my marriage. I I am so grateful for the man that I married, and I know that it's two-sided, but I love my marriage. I don't know if that's a weird answer, but that
No, that's not a weird answer. It's sadly not a common answer.
yeah, fair.
Yeah, so that means you got something good going if that's the case.
Yeah,
So, alright. Well, what would you say was your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
biggest failure. Probably being self-centered, like, being so focused on myself growing up and also into my days when I was following after the music dream, all of that, being so focused on myself that I was absolutely miserable. And probably the lesson that I learned from that is just to turn it over to Christ. Like, your past mistakes so you can move on and make peace with those moments that you look back and you just cringe at yourself. Turn it over to Christ so you can make peace with it. But also, if you want to be happy, forget about yourself.
Mm,
Hands
yeah.
down.
I really like what you said there. A lot of the times what happens is we get forgiven by God and we don't forgive ourselves. So, I think that's the harder part. Okay, I lied. I actually have an extra question based on your question from the success question, because there's a lot of people who listen to this who are probably struggling in their marriages or are in the single space looking for marriages. So, um, if you were to give someone advice of what you think is the thing, I'm sure it's not just one, but the thing that has allowed you for how long you've been married to be happy in your marriage, what do you think that would be?
Ooh, there's a lot of things that I would say. One being forgiveness and acceptance. I feel like our especially on social media, at least I don't know if this is just my audience or not my audience, but my algorithm for whatever was led to this. But I feel like a lot of times social media loves to tell women, like, if he loved you, he would do better and he would change and all these things. And, like, yes, that's true to an extent, but we are all imperfect. And when you just accept it, like, you're going to find a lot more happiness. Like, obviously, there are parameters to that. Like, we're not going to go around accepting abusive marriages. And I'm going to put that parameter out there because that's important. But in general, if he's a good man, then just be grateful. He doesn't have to be perfect, like, you see the socks on the floor, you can choose to be so angry, and you can let it wear on you, and you can tell yourself that if he loved you, he would just do that small thing and take care of it, or you can just love him and pick up the socks. It's okay. Like, instead of worrying about whether he loves you enough, love him.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. I think that goes both ways. Again, I was talking to my son, he's been out a little over a year, so I feel like I talk about him all the time, but, I'm really proud of him. So he's been out for a little over a year. He's already saying, he's starting to think about he shares with me what he wants in a marriage and all this different stuff. And I told him, I go, look, you're never going to find somebody who's got everything you want, right? There's never 100% perfect person out there. If you could get 80% of what you want, and then, yeah, there's some things that you wish would change, but you can live with, I'd say you're doing pretty good, you know? Nobody's gonna check every single box, and every single person is gonna have 1 or 2 characteristics or quirks or personality traits that you're like, "Man, I really wish they did that differently." But if it's something that you can live with, and it's not something that's really hurting you emotionally, mentally, physically, like, that's a win,
Mhm.
for a lot of people. And if you guys are aligned in communication and spiritually, like, A plus, you know? And then if you have a few things you like to do together, that's even better. So, I mean,
Yeah.
man. So, well, that's great. That's awesome.
Cool.
Appreciate you
You
sharing
know,
that.
comment on that.
Yeah.
I feel like as you're leading up to marriage and me and Connor's dating was an absolute train wreck. That's a story for another day. But
Yeah.
leading up to dating, my recommendation would be to go in it with your eyes as wide open as possible, trying I don't wanna say being selfish, but yes, like, being like, "Can I live with this person?" But after you get married, completely forget about yourself. Like, this isn't about you. It's if you wanna be happy in your marriage, don't seek your happiness in marriage, seek the happiness of your spouse. Like, truly, and not just being like, "Oh, he made me mad last night, but I'm gonna make him breakfast and still be angry at him anyway." No, truly love him. Like, love your spouse. Like, when you're angry, find it within yourself to love them the way you would love your child or the way that God loves you. Just love them, not even necessarily because they deserve it, but love them, and that is how you're gonna find happiness in marriage.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that's so sad, you mentioned your algorithm. The thing that's so sad is that is so counter to what you're hearing out there. Everybody's, you know, and I think the thing that stinks about a lot of this stuff is that some of it is very true, right? Like you mentioned you selfishness and whatnot, and how you feel like almost sounds like you feel like you're almost selfish doing this podcast thing. Well, you're not. That's not being selfish, right? That's not selfishness. That's just you needing an outlet and you're doing good work and then making you feel like that is not being selfish. But some people, they take this whole self-care thing to a point of becoming selfish. Then it's all about my self-care. And that's where it becomes a problem. And I would add to what you were saying before where you said, you know, if you made your spouse, you know, make your spouse's comfort more important. That's a Gordon B. Hinckley quote where he says, yeah, I think Mike Wallace asked him, "Why is the divorce rate so low in the church?" And he said, "If every husband made his wife's comfort his first priority and every wife made her husband's comfort his first priority, there'd be less marriages, less divorces in the world." The important thing about that is both people have to do that,
It's
because
true.
if they don't, then one person like, if your priority is husband, kids, you, but then your husband's priority is husband, kids, you're left in the lurch every time. And so the benefit there between the 2 of you is it sounds like you're both trying to do that. Maybe not perfectly, but trying to do that.
Well, and I guess that's why I almost, like, struggled saying my greatest success was my marriage because I do know, like, I think all the time about how lucky I am that I have Connor, especially with how we dated and how we got to where we were. I'm so lucky that it was Connor that I ended up with because he gives that to me back. If you find yourself in that kind of relationship where it's very one-sided and you're giving all the love and you're not getting any love in return, the thing that I would say is the Lord's gonna guide you about whether it's time to leave the marriage. There are appropriate times to get divorced. Like, there are. Absolutely, there's appropriate times to get divorced or whatever decision it is that you're facing and you need to make. The beautiful thing about the gospel teaching you to forgive and to just love freely is that even if your spouse is being extremely selfish, even if the Lord is telling you that it is time potentially to leave a marriage, if you can still choose to love through the whole thing, you're gonna find peace and healing a lot faster. Like, I had a Relief Society president, and she ended up in a marriage that was very abusive and awful and just very easily could have completely destroyed her life. In all of the ways that the world talks about, it did ruin her life. But the answer that she was getting repeatedly from God was love him, love him, love him. She also got the answer, divorce him, but love him at the same time, because if you can find that love in yourself, you're gonna still find that healing.
Yeah, that that makes sense. Yeah, you know, it's and the other thing I would add to that is if, I I'm an attorney, and so every time, you know, anytime somebody, in my area, the church is relatively small in Sacramento, California. I'm sure you're dealing the same thing on the East Coast. It's not Utah. So anytime somebody is getting divorced, I get the first call for a referral for an attorney, you know, and so I get to hear a lot of these stories. And, you know, uh, if someone's calling me and they're not quite sure what they're going to do, I always tell them, I go, "Hey, you know what? If you think there's a 1% chance that this is gonna work, like, you gotta give it your all to try to make it work, but the second you've gotten confirmation that it's time to go, don't belabor it. You know, don't, because 'cause you're just gonna cause more pain. You're just, you know, you're not doing the noble thing."
Yeah,
by doing that, you're making it 1,000 times worse, and people just have to come to that conclusion on their own. Like, you could tell
true.
them to the blue in the face, and they're not gonna listen to it, so
Yeah.
what we're gonna before I ask my last question, we talked about having your husband come on the podcast. I would say we should have you both come on, and you guys can just give us a lesson on happy marriages. We can hear your story.
Yeah.
Hear your story from both of your perspectives on how the dating went. So, but last question is one day way down the road, you're gonna pass away and there's gonna be a eulogy. What's the one thing you hope somebody says about you in your eulogy?
Yeah. I remember reading a quote about Marjorie Pay Hinckley. I think it was Marjorie Pay Hinckley. I'm like 85% sure it was Marjorie Pay Hinckley, where they talked about when you were around her, you just felt so much love.
Hmm,
I would love for anyone who, like, comes in contact with me, whether the conversation's minimal, whatever it is, I would love for anyone who walks into my presence to just, like, wow, like, for some reason, right now, I feel so accepted and loved. I would love for that to be my eulogy.
well, that's awesome. Well, so if people wanna find you, give us all the places they can find your stuff.
'Kay. Um, autumndixon.com. There is Come Follow Me Autumn on Instagram. Uh, Honestly, if you just type in Autumn Dixon, you're gonna run into most of my stuff. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, a couple other smaller platforms, YouTube, I'm on TikTok. If you type in my name, it'll pop up. I should probably have those handles memorized. I do not have
That's
those handles memorized.
that's okay. You got 5 little kids, you got mom brain. That's how that works.
It's so true.
That's a
Very true.
real thing.
Yeah, it is so I can testify of what you said. It is very real.
Yeah. Well, I'm just excited that I met an Indianapolis Mission alumni. That's awesome. That's great. Um, I gotta tell you, you're doing great work. I think it's awesome what you're doing. I checked out your stuff and I immediately was like, "I gotta get this person on." So I hope you just keep doing what you're doing. It's necessary, it's needed. More people need to hear these types of messages. So really appreciate it. For those of you who've been listening, we got a whole bunch of other stuff coming up too. We always got a lot more exciting stuff in the can. So subscribe if you haven't already. And Autumn, we're gonna have you and your husband on again. We're gonna have to set that up. So
Love that. That'll be great.
anyway, all right. We'll talk to you guys later. Let's